Never Learn Bokuben Seasons 1 and 2 are like a breath of fresh air for the romance harem genre. Now, romance is an easy concept for everybody to grasp, but some out of the loop may be asking, what's a harem? Well, according to Google, a harem is the wives or concubines of a polygamous man. Jeez la-fucking wheeze, you have no chill, Google. A harem, at least in terms of anime and manga, is like Twilight or Bridget Jones, just times 11. Tons of men or women want a man or woman who just so happens to be the main character, then sexual and romantic hijinks ensue. It's exactly what it sounds like. And the best part for publishers is that this stuff is made to last forever. Mach and Key, a very well-known franchise that is also the spawn of Satan, ran for 13 years in monthly manga form. It started all the way back in April 2007 and just ended this past March. And this isn't like a niche series, I promise you, there's tons of these things. Just a couple that I've seen personally, Oraimo, the comic artist and his assistants, Monster Musume, but there's even Nisekoi, Strawberry 100%, all of these are harems, and they do fluctuate in terms of quality. But the problem here is that regardless of how good or even how bad they are, they all seem to fall into the same pits. The worst of which is that these end in either two ways. The main character ends up with one of the girls, most likely the most popular one with fans, or he ends up with none of the girls, pretty much making the entire show a waste of my fucking time. Fuck you, Oraimo. And while those two endings is kind of a wide criteria, I think the overall problem is that the endings usually just aren't earned. Because these shows can juggle from 3 up to 10 or so love interests, the series begins to stretch itself thin. A garbage show like Oraimo gets worse and worse as the cast gets larger. And so ending it, regardless of what happens or regardless of what kind of fans you are, will feel like a waste of time. So Pizza Dad, what the fuck makes We Never Learn so damn good? Well, it's not just about the end game, but it's about how we got there. I should specify that I am talking about the anime and not the manga. The manga isn't even done yet, but most importantly is that it's almost completely different from what I understand. In the manga, there's more side characters, more character backstories, subplots, and there's even 5 different endings, each of which for each different girl, meaning that regardless of what kind of fan you are satisfied, which is a luxury that the anime adaptation doesn't really get. Also, like usual, I hope you watch the entire series, including the 2 OVA episodes, since I won't be explaining anything here. Alright, so, what's so good about We Never Learn? Well, the best way to explain it is that it seems to meld a romantic comedy, along with a harem, and even a bit of a mystery element in order to make an enjoyable show that I can't really relate to anything I've ever seen before. And believe me, this sounds like it wouldn't really work on paper. Where romantic comedies don't ever shy away from who the love interest is and instead hones in on the story of how the main character and them got together, harems are instead focused on all the little moments, the misunderstandings, the accidents. Oh my gosh, the accidents. And it's because of this focus why harems are usually also labeled under comedies. And while We Never Learn does follow a lot of these harem tropes, it does them with a sense of innocence. Yes, there's lots of stuff here for horny anime fans, but that doesn't diminish the show's writing. Or maybe I'm just immune to this shit now. Regardless, there's this kind of genuine essence that runs through the entire show. One that takes a situation like 2 high schoolers sleeping in the same bed, and yeah, it does the usual stuff you'd expect, the awkwardness between the two, the forced sexual tension, but then Fumino, who up to this point was either the dumb friend or the mediator amidst the love triangle, begins to talk about why she loves the stars, about how her mother nurtured that interest until her last day on Earth, and how that pushes her to want to be a science major regardless of how good she is in literature. Nariyuki then begins to talk about his future aspirations, or lack thereof. Fumino then explains that she'll support him no matter what, then falls asleep, holding Nariyuki's arm. Nariyuki falls asleep as well. Fumino dreams that she's holding her mother's hand, but then wakes up holding Nariyuki's, which symbolizes how he will nurture and cultivate Fumino's passion for science just like her mother did. And in a fascinating moment, instead of pulling away, Fumino gets closer and falls asleep on Nariyuki's shoulder. But of course they both wake up in the morning and they realize what happened and then question the implications of what could follow on the train ride home. And that, my friends, is We Never Learn's Season 1 finale. You want to know what any other harem would have done? Just think of the most cookie-cutter, paper-thin plot of any porno that you've ever seen, and there you got yourself a fucking harem, boys! Hell yeah! That one scene encapsulates why this series is so good. Any part of it could have had some perverted, sleazy edge to it where, Nariyuki looks down Fumino's shirt or some shit. Or it could have been lazy as hell by beating me over the head that they may like each other now. But no, it gives us a situation, a boy and a girl who, at this point, are just good friends and have maintained that for the entire season. Sure, they rely on each other for assistance, but there's nothing else there, at least before this scene. Any other series would have had fucking red arrows and alarms going off while screaming, "Hey, Fumino really does like Nariyuki. She wants his pee-pee." We Never Learn just takes the time to flesh out these moments so that when Fumino does fall in love with Nariyuki in season 2, it's well earned. And instead of just relying on basically the same moments, just switching out the girls or even genre stereotypes, the show has special situations catered for each different girl's personality. Ogata is ditzy, so she wouldn't realize that Nariyuki can't recognize her at all after her makeover at a salon. Uruka isn't used to flirting or dressing up girly, so her friends throw her in a dress and send her on a date with Nariyuki and expect her to flirt with him. Fumino has kept the belief that she has no feelings for Nariyuki for the entire series, and boy oh boy do the writers put her in a shit ton of situations to test that stance. There's even the teacher, Kirasu, who's mostly used for awkward situations where she almost always ends up naked in the end. That gets old really fast. But when she does actually give guidance to characters over their worries, or when she does her best to do the right thing, that's when she's really interesting. Yeah, when it comes to stuff not focused on the romance, the show has a repetition problem. Maybe in the manga this stuff is separated more, it feels more distinct, but in the anime it feels like some of these episodes use the same plot elements or even the same exact structure, not even 3 episodes apart. Sometimes they even have the gall to use the same damn punchline. Need I mention the lingerie and masseuse episodes? It does get to a point where some of this stuff ends up feeling like filler, but the good definitely outweighs the bad in this department. Now, some of you are probably asking, "Hey, where's this damn mystery you're talking about?" First off, never fucking yell at me. And secondly, it's less of a mystery and more of a guessing game. Our main characters aren't solving a murder or anything. Hell, the mystery isn't even diegetic. It's instead about the audience ourselves guessing where the story is going to go. Meanwhile, the show doesn't care a damn bit about answering that question, at least not up until the final 20 seconds of the series. I shit you not. Credit where credit's due, the show keeps its promise as a harem series where whoever the final girl will be is a mystery. Now, usually in these kinds of series, even in good romantic comedies, it's not hard to tell. But We Never Learn does such a good job at giving these characters depth, at making us care for them and what they want, that none of them feel useless. Nobody really feels misplaced. Some may be underutilized, but none of them feel like they don't belong. Honestly, anybody could have got together with the main character in the end and it would still feel right. For the entire first half of season 1, you think Ogata's got this in the bag. Then Uruka starts to make some moves and even confesses, only for it to come off as a misunderstanding. She then backs down for her tournaments, only for Fumino to enter the scene. And this is just how the show constantly flows. Whenever you think one girl has the upper hand, it gets fucking slam dunked by somebody else. And now, I have to talk about the ending and the second OVA set after the finale. I suggest you skip to here if you want the ending to be a surprise. In my opinion, the show works best that way. Anyways, let's fucking go. So, Uruka being the one who ends up with Nariyuki in the end was a surprise initially, seeing as the childhood friend trope is one very prevalent in anime. However, Uruka ending up with Nariyuki makes sense when watching the whole show in like a day or so like I did. I have seen complaints on the interwebs about how Uruka is boring and bland and even how the ending is garbage, which we will cover in a second. But to me, Uruka was the most likable. She had a clear goal. She sacrificed a lot for that goal, including her social life as a teenager and even leaving all of her friends behind to go to a prestigious swimming program in another country. Uruka works her ass off every day and Nariyuki recognizes it. Many times throughout the series, he's the only one who is at her competitions or even emotional over her wins and her losses. They admire each other's aspirations and dedication, so it's understandable why these two would end up together. Because, let's be honest here, put that same lens up to the other girls, and while there are reasons for all of them to be a good pick, none of them will add up to Uruka. Also, she's the only one who can make the first move in general. She confessed first, she's the only one who held hands with Nariyuki at the festival, she puts the work in. Great googly moogly, she's Minori reincarnated back to get what's rightfully hers, red hair and all. All jokes aside, I do understand the arguments over the ending feeling rushed. Due to the nature of the guessing game that is the show's romance, you can't really set up a clear-cut conclusion that will naturally unfold. Nothing can be obvious, and it kind of had to be a surprise. However, the way it was actually executed was less than stellar. Apparently, the manga gives more time to Nariyuki pondering his feelings, Uruka explicitly explaining to the group that she's going overseas, which never was shown in the show, and there was even a long confession scene. And while I would have loved that, I do like the idea of Nariyuki and Uruka figuring out after she leaves the country that they're destined to be together. I just wish everything got a little more time. As is, the ending was fine. It was a great idea, just a bad assembly. However, imagine my surprise when I found out that there was an OVA episode set after the finale. I was ready. Apparently it had to do with some mock wedding photos when, in the manga, Nariyuki and Uruka get engaged later on. So in my head, I thought that there'd be some kind of conclusion there. But no. There's a scene where Nariyuki longs for Uruka to kiss him, so I guess that's cool. It confirms that he does in fact have feelings for Uruka, but overall it's just another filler episode. It even had the balls to have an ending gag where Nariyuki's little sister, who's in love with him for some reason, finds all of the photos and then screams at the top of her lungs. No reunion, no conclusion to the series, no bookend, nothing that fully adapts the manga's ending, just this filler bullshit. In retrospect, this whole ending makes the series look like it focused too much on jokes and filler rather than setting up this ending. As I said before, it makes sense and I'm on board, but the problem was the actual execution. The show wasn't patient enough. It wanted a cake without throwing it into the oven for the entire cooking time. I hate to say it, I do hate to say it. But for this show, at least, I understand why fans want a third season. I don't think it'll ever happen. I think that the studio realized that it wasn't financially viable to keep making an anime adaptation for a manga that's going to end very, very soon. I think they just realized that it's better to end the show quickly in order to sell more manga volumes, rather than to fully adapt the story into an anime. Yeah, it sucks, but that's just the name of the game. To summarize what I said, I don't hate or even dislike the anime's second season, but it definitely had lots of things that could have been left on the cutting room floor instead of the stuff that was trimmed to make space. And it all just comes together to jumble up the ending, and that's pretty disappointing. Maybe the manga fixes it, but I don't really plan on reading it right now. I got other stuff on my plate. Speaking of which, let's wrap this shit up. For a while, I feared that romance anime kind of hit its stride in the late 2000s and early 2010s. A ton of hits came out around that time, including my current favorite anime of all time. And that's great, but I was afraid that that time was over, that the ship had sailed. And harem series that kind of have a main pairing but still emphasize all these other possible love interests were the new norm. Thankfully, I think We Never Learned and Gamers are two anime series that instill some faith in me about modern romance anime. I did start Rascal Bunny Senpai, but I never finished it, so I'll have to rewatch that next in order to add that to the list. Usually, for any sort of fiction, the ending is the most important thing to me. It can make or break a show. And while this ending is good in concept, it does fall short on execution. The manga is probably a better recommendation overall, but having not read it myself, I can't really say that for certain. However, when it comes to the anime, for a 26 episode series with 2 lackluster OVAs, it's a pretty easy recommendation. It still takes the harem genre as we know it and flips it on its head. It still has really good characters and an enjoyable story. It doesn't waste my time with a gaggle of seasons, and each episode, despite the abundance of filler, does its best to add some kind of appeal. With that appeal mostly being our characters. Mostly. It's not nearly as tight as something like Toradora or Your Lie in April, but it's still better than Chunibyo Season 1 and definitely Season 2. If you have a Hulu account, I suggest adding it to your list of shows for a rainy day. It will definitely not be a waste of time. Anyways, that's all you're getting from me. If I read the manga and love it, then I will return with another video. If not, then I'll be back with something else. Like, subscribe, and all that jazz. I'll catch you guys next time. Later, kids. Have a good night. Anime Titty.